Welcome back. Today we will be doing the second part of the series with list T with SQL Server. Creating a CRUD application on Microsoft SQL Server with list T, and today's learning outcome being knowing the connection string and how to store it in the application, and understand that we can log into the SQL with Windows authentication in addition to the SQL Server authentication that I showed you on the last lecture. And when we created the database, we added a table and some stored procedures to it. And also finally, how to create methods in C# console app to insert, retrieve and delete data to and from the database. So we will continue with the first part when we created the database on Microsoft SQL. So this is the lesson plan, and you could have a quick look at this. So basically, flipping over to Visual Studio. Now here I'm going to continue working on the generic class demo project on this collection classes project solution. And here, first of all, I will have to create, if you go back to the learning outcome, know the connection string and how to store it in the application. And what is a connection string? Basically a connection string is a string that allows the application to connect to the SQL Server database. Okay, so for connection string, what we'll do is we will create, there is a couple of ways of doing it, and I am chosen this way. To the project I will add a settings file. So click on the new item, and there is a settings file icon. So click on add. So it will add a settings file. So settings1.settings, and it has got a settings designer.cs, which it looks like this. Okay, now this code was generated by a tool, so don't try to change it manually, because it will be changes to this file may cause incorrect behavior and will be lost if the code is regenerated. Okay, so here I have to create a connection string, and let me give the name to the connection string as collection con string. Okay, collection con string. Okay, and this is a drop down list which I will pick the connection string, and scope is either user or application, so it is application scope. Now for this value, let me tell you, I have shown you how to log in to the Microsoft SQL Server using SQL Server authentication. Today I'm going to teach you how to log into the SQL Server using Windows. So if you just disconnect it and connect the database engine, see, Windows authentication is by default. Now I will tell you, this is far more secure, and it doesn't require you to create those logins. So now it is connected through Windows authentication. Please stick to Windows authentication, but I would like to show you where the SQL Server authentication also sits. So with this Windows authentication, you see within the database node tree, all the databases that are available, and we have made this collections database, so that's available here. So this one, within the security folder, there is a login and there is a SA. With this SA or system administration, we have logged into the SQL with SQL Server authentication. However, Microsoft suggests that Windows authentication is the default authentication mode and is much more secure than SQL Server authentication. Let me shift to the Visual Studio. and straight away now start writing the code. So I've got this static void main and main entry in the program class open, and in this last part of this tutorial, I wish to actually put the code right from my clipboard, on a notepad, which I have copied previously to save time writing code line by line. But I will definitely explain as I have completed each of these methods, by pasting. And the intention, my plan will be to complete writing the functional methods first and then call them in proper sequence from the main method, so that there is no compile time error that pops up when a method is called which still doesn't exist from the main method. Okay, now the first thing that I need to show you is how to create the settings file and write the connection string there named a collection con string. So here I have already done it, and I'll tell you what I have done. So this settings.settings file, you can create a settings file from clicking add new item and this settings file. So I have already created this settings file, so I'll just cancel it. So once you click on add, so it will create a settings file for you, empty settings file with these columns: name, type, scope and value. And I have given it a name collection constring, and there's a type drop down, and I picked up connection string because that's what it is supposed to. And this scope is application scope, and this value, this is the data source, is the server name, desktop L4LKD6P, that is my computer. It will definitely vary from user to user. So for your machine, this data source will be different. It's your server address, your computer address. When you have actually installed your SQL Server Management Studio, you'll see the data source there. And initial catalog is the database name, which in this case is collection data, and integrated security is SSPI, means it's authentication is Windows authentication. So if you look into the SQL Server Management Studio, so this is my collection data that I have created last time. Okay, so getting back to the code, now here this will be the last method to be filled, because I'll have to first write all the methods, functional methods, and then call them sequentially, just to avoid getting the compile time error. So first method that I have copied on my clipboard is get records method, which returns a list of person. It's a static method. Okay, so this method is, let me just paste this and I will explain in a minute. So this is making a list instance with the person class, and calling it persons is new list person. So this is the person class which I have earlier created, and this is just a model class which is nothing but it has got a couple of public properties returning string, first name, last name, and with getters and setters, and there is a parameterless default constructor, and there is another constructor which accepts the first name and last name and assigns the first name and last name declared in the declaration as public properties to the argument to the constructor. Okay, so getting back to the program class again, so what this does is that it, as you are already aware that there is an add method on this persons class which adds an object to the end of the list. Okay, so I'm calling a new person with first name whatever colon Harry, last name Brush, and I've added a few person, and you can instantiate you can add new person objects like this notation, and it is finally returning this person object. Okay, so it is fulfilling the return criteria for this method, which is returning a list of person. Now next is insert data to the database. Okay, that's the most important method which I will explain in a second after having copied and pasted it. Just bear with me for a minute, for a bit. Copy. So you have to be careful even if you have copied it earlier. Okay, now I need to actually change a little bit here. So this is an new SQL connection. Now this new SQL connection, I have to tell you another important thing is that, there is a Nuget package. Okay, so that one, it is telling the type or namespace properties doesn't exist in the namespace generic classes. Are you missing something? So here actually it is not generic classes. This is generic class demo. That is the project name, generic class demo. So that's on top, generic class demo, and you don't have any properties here. So generic class demo dot settings dot default dot collection string 1. So there is no collection constring 1, but there is collection constring, just collection constring without any 1 appending 1, because that is what we have just set the connection string name as collection constring. Okay, so now this var records, in this records variable I am calling the get records method, okay, which is actually returning a list of person. Okay, now then there is a using statement. Now this using C# keyword is important because it whatever you write within the using block, starts with a curly brace and ends here. If there is just like a resource you are using, and resource here is the connection string. So this within the scope of this using statement, the connection string operates. You can do whatever with this connection string. You can open the connection string, and you don't need the connection string to close here. You don't actually require that statement because it will be out of scope. Once this using statement is finished, the connection string object will be disposed automatically. It will be closed. Okay, so here what I have done is connection string dot open. So this open method opens the database connection with the property settings specified by the SQL connection dot connection string. Okay, so here this I have also earlier installed this package system.configuration.configuration manager. And how do you install a package from Nuget package? That is through by highlighting the project and manage Nuget package. So this is already installed. So what this does, if you read the description, it provides types that support using configuration files. Okay, so it provides type that use supporting configuration files. So this is a configuration file, basically settings file. Okay, and once you write something with the scope value, everything is written back in the settings.designer.cs. So here you can see that you've got this connection string written already over it. Okay, and also there's an external app config file that I have created. So as you edit this settings file, the app config file, this configuration file already gets this connection string written. So you can either use this settings file, or there is another way of directly using the app config file. So choice is yours. It doesn't matter, both are good practices. Right, so in this using connection string, I'm opening the connection string, and then I'm assigning a variable sp name, and that is the stored procedure name. So I've already told you about the stored procedure. So this is calling the stored procedure dbo.insert person data, and it is also assigning a SQL command variable, which is the new SQL command, which initializes, if you see the IntelliSense, the mouse over, it shows, it's not an IntelliSense, sorry, it is just mouse over, it tells you that it initializes a new instance of the SQL command class with the text of the query and a SQL connection. So this is the text of the query is this stored procedure name and the connection string object. And then SQL command dot command type, this is the method which gets or sets a value indicating how the SQL command dot command text property is to be interpreted. Like, this has got command type on the right hand side. It is this SQL command dot command type is assigned command type dot stored procedure. Now stored procedure, this command type is an enum. So there are other options also, like it could be a table direct or it could be a text. So if you write a query rather than create a stored procedure, you can also run it, but stored procedure is always a good practice because it gives you more security and it gives you reusability and all that sort of things, that you can just read in your additional time. Okay, and then SQL command dot parameters, these parameters, this property gets the SQL parameter collection dot add with value. Now if you look into the stored procedure, just a flash, if you recall the stored procedure that we have written, collection data. Okay, so collection data, once again, just for refreshing quickly, stored procedures that we have created, insert person data. Okay, so if you click on modify, so this is actually taking two parameters, or arguments, at first name, at last name, both of nvarchar type, right? So getting back to the flipping over to the Visual Studio, so to the SQL command you are adding parameters, add with value. This is add with value. Add with value sets a value at the end of the SQL parameter collection. Okay, and so you are giving, it is taking a string parameter name and an object value. So parameter name is at first name, at last name, and this is the data type, SQL database type dot nvarchar. Now this is just a simple for each loop where you can see for each var item in records. What is records? That is the record which returns a list of persons. For each var item in this collection, SQL command dot parameter 0, that is the first item, dot value equals item dot first name. This is the each of these item dot first name. If you look into this IntelliSense, it automatically gives you the first name, last name. This is the person class. Okay, because records is nothing but it is a list of persons. Okay, and then finally the SQL command dot execute non-query. This execute non-query method executes a transact SQL, T-SQL, that is the SQL stored procedure is this transact SQL statement, and it executes this transact SQL statement against the connection and returns the number of rows affected. Okay, and there is a catch block for exception handling, exception X console.writeLine. If the try block fails, then it falls over to the catch block to write a good message, user-friendly message on the screen. So that's all it does. Now here, let us call this insert data to the database. So let's see what happens, So now let me call, because this method is already in place, so let me call this method in the main class just to show you by visiting the database that it does actually insert the records to the database person table. So if I run this application, Control F5, and that will tell me if there is any runtime error or not. So at the moment, press any key to continue. It is not writing anything, but if you just visit the database, okay, so collection data and dbo.person, if you look into the edit, select top 1000 rows. So you have got all this data already because I have run it earlier also. So it has got a lot of other data. So if you wish to see the, you know, after clearing all the data. So probably it will be a good idea at this moment to let you write the delete. So clear the database. So there is a procedure to clear the database. Which one is, I'll tell you. I'll just follow me in a bit. So this is delete database data. So let me copy it from my clipboard. So I've got insert data to database, get data from delete DB data. Okay, so here I'll just copy it over the full thing. Okay, right, and then here also I have to make these changes, not generic classes, but this is generic class demo, and there is nothing like properties here. And then collection const string, and then let me first run this. Okay, first delete everything from the database, and then I will explain, okay, how this delete stored procedure works. Okay, so right, so again Control F5 to run this application. Okay, now this time what I'm expecting is that it will first delete all the data and then insert data to database. And what is this data? That is nothing but this person. This is in-memory object created by getRecords method, which is being called by, remember, this getRecords is called in this method, insert data to database. So if you go back again to your management studio, and then if you refresh this method or table, and then select top 1000 rows, so it has deleted the everything, and then it has rewritten the data from the in-memory collection. This is the in-memory collection, right? Great, so far so good. So next is, I will just have only one more method to complete the application. So that is the get data. So you have to get the data from your application, right? You won't switch over to SQL Server Management Studio to look into the data, right? That is just for learning. So get data from DB. That is the method, and I will then explain both the methods. Okay, let me complete this one. Clear generic class demo, and then there's no properties, and then this is right, and then just build it once, Control Shift B, the hotkey combination, and build is succeeded. So everything is fine. Now let me explain what the delete DB data was doing. You can get rid of this unnecessary stuff here, and then I think you know already the first line, the variable connection string, which I've already explained. Now here it is very similar to insert data to DB, only that it is a bit easier to understand, because here using connection string, try connection string.open. Again, I am opening the connection string, and then because connection string was, you don't need that, but when this using statement scope is finished, then this connection string is automatically closed. So every time you go to the new method, it needs to be opened. And then the SP name is dbo.delete%data, and which we have done it in the first lecture. And SQL command, similarly, new SQL command, very similar, SP name and connection string you are passing to this variable SQL command, and again this is the same line. And here the only difference is being SQL data reader. I am just creating an instance of a data reader object which provides a way of reading a forward only stream of rows. So it is SQL command dot execute reader. Okay, so this was also so there is no data reader here for insertion, but there will be data reader for retrieving the data. Okay, so this is the command, because you are not inserting, you are just reading it basically. So here SQL data reader is actually reading a forward only stream of rows. Okay, and then finally you don't need this connection string dot close is automatically taken care of by this using statement. When it reaches out of scope, it automatically connection string is no more available, this resource. So, and here get data from DB, I think you still know there is no reason for explaining these things again. Now only change things are SQL data reader is again SQL command dot execute reader. Okay, so here we have seen SQL, there was no execute reader statement, but for a get or a delete, it provides a way of reading a forward only stream of rows, because I need to retrieve. So while SDR, while this SQL data reader dot reads, while it still reads, advances the SQL data reader to the next record, I have to get these lines out from the data reader. Okay, so that's the way to not only retrieve but to read it on the console, to display it on the console, to print it on the console. And if there is a fallover, then there is a console.writeLine with the exception message. Now after having explained this, now I am ready to complete my main method. So the main method actually after completion, it looks like this. So let me just copy it over and then I will explain. Now you can have a quick look at it. I think you guys are now enlightened a lot. So first line, console.writeLine, you can understand that. First delete all the records from the person table. So every time you are writing the data with this insert data, so it needs to be cleared first. And then you are putting a console.writeLine, one separator, and then another line now reading data from the person table. So again calling get data from database. Okay, so this is actually select statement. The stored procedure actually retrieves the data from the person table, and then there is a separator at this line, and then because it is just doesn't show any data from the person table after the delete, because first we have deleted all the records, then we are getting data, so it was insertion was not done, so you will not get any data. And then there is a separator, and then now inserting this line will insert, these two lines will insert with a proper comment of now inserting data to the person table, and there is another separator, and then this line will say finally reading data from the person table after the insertion, and then call this get data from database to write everything, which this get data from database, this console.writeLine writes everything when it retrieves the data from the person table. So now quickly running it will show you the records. Okay, and does it make sense? First delete all the records from the person table, separated, now reading data from the person table because there is no data, so it is now giving you a command, print out, display that it doesn't show any data from person table after the delete, and then another separator, and then it is printing a command, printing to the console line, now inserting data to the person table, and then another separator, and then finally reading data from the person table after the insertion. So this is the data. Okay, so basically whatever was stored in the in-memory collection is actually going to the persistent database storage. So that's all. And before we leave, let's do a recap. It's always a good idea to recap. So in this lesson, we observed that we have learned how to create the settings file and store the connection string there, and connect to the SQL Server Management Studio via more secure Windows authentication, write the methods to create an in-memory collection by list_t, and finally write the other relevant methods to insert records to the table, retrieve data from the table, and delete records when the application starts. That's it. Thank you.